Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and want to start out by just saying that LOL, Green Bay Packers, that'll teach you, you Packers, that'll teach you to trade for a player who's got a big name. Right? No, that's not really what I'm actually saying. The Green Bay Packers trade for Micah Parsons, though, earlier this week. And it's, of course, been the biggest news story in the NFL. And Parsons gets to Green Bay and he starts practicing. And everybody in the entire universe assumed that Micah Parsons' back injury that was keeping him out of practice for the Dallas Cowboys was just I would like to be traded. Actually, I need a new contract. That was the real reason he had a back injury. And yes, we have had recent examples of that with the Minnesota Vikings, including TJ Hawkinson's back slash inner ear slash maybe it was vertigo that all of a sudden got resolved in the minute that TJ Hawkinson got his contract extension, and we all laughed and moved on and played football. So Parsons arrives with the Packers, and even Adam Schefter himself from ESPN, he made a little crack about it on Twitter. He's got a little bit of a sense of humor. So he said, ho ho, guess the back's okay. And I think we all said the same thing. I made the joke as well. And anytime any of you asked in the live stream, hey, do you think that Micah Parsons back injury, like you think that that's a problem? I said, no, come on. It was fake. It was just him finding a way to sit out. And then it turns out that it was actually real. And I wondered about this, if it was possible that maybe Schefter got a message from the agent of Micah Parsons, like, hey man, this actually was a real injury. Like, what are you doing here? Tweeting, calling us out. And so, because here's the thing about this Schefter report, I'll show it to you, what Schefter put on Twitter. There's a lot of medical details here that I don't know if he came up with himself. So here's what Adam Schefter tweeted earlier today. Packers linebacker Micah Parsons has been dealing with an L4, L5 facet joint sprain in his back, and he may take an epidural injection prior to Sunday's game versus the Lions if needed to help him play, per sources. Before trading for Parsons last week, the Cowboys prescribed him on a 5-day plan of anti-inflammatory, some medicines I've never heard of to help him recover from back tightness. They also had him on a physical therapy program. Parsons has been practicing this week and he is trying to play in Sunday's opener versus the Lions, though one source said it is still uncertain if he will. So here's the thing. There are the first comment is, obvious. Like, wait, did Jerry Jones, is he genius for trading this wounded player that was, had the secret injury and L4, L5 joints and all that? And now that the Packers are stuck with him, but they got him in there and they didn't realize that he's got this problem. And so now that he's got this problem, they can't exactly take it back. They have to just live with it, right? I mean, that's what's happening, right? Probably not. Probably not. More likely than not, the Packers got Micah Parsons knowing that he had this injury and were okay with it, considering they're signing him to a 4-year contract that is the most expensive in the NFL. So I would assume that they had been keeping up the latest on his health issues before they made the trade. So let's go through where it's a big deal and where it's not a big deal that Micah Parsons has this injury with his back. It is not a big deal, I don't think, long-term with Micah Parsons, even within this year. None of this, a sprain in the back is not that unusual. It happens. Guys get back injuries pretty often, and they do stuff to try to get on the field that none of us would ever be able to go through, but they're NFL players and it'll be okay going forward. This does not sound to me like it is an injury that should keep him from being Micah Parsons in the long run. It sounds like more of a short-term type of issue for him, not one of those, not degenerative, or, there's no words there that make you go, wow, this could be a major problem for the Green Bay Packers for the rest of the season, or a major problem for them in the trade, and Jerry Jones hoodwinked them and the Packers got screwed and stuck with a injured player. And no, it's probably not that, right? Now, I know that's what you guys want, but it's probably not that. So that I don't think is a huge deal for Parsons. Football players get banged up. He's 26 years old. I mean, look, even we went through this with Danielle Hunter with the neck thing, where we all thought, oh my gosh, Danielle Hunter, this injury, you can't keep him. You can't sign him. You can't extend him. His career is going to be shortened. And then, modern medicine is pretty darn impressive. And Danielle Hunter is still one of the best players in the entire NFL. And that's not to say that injuries don't matter and that back injuries don't matter for an edge rusher where you have to do a ton of bending and twisting and all that sort of stuff. But this one in particular does not sound like it is going to be a nagging long-term thing, that it will heal and he'll go forward and play football the way you'd expect. That's my read on that situation. Not a doctor, but that's just my understanding from this football injury. That's where it's not that big of a deal. I don't think the Packers got hoodwinked. However, where it is a big deal is week 1. And when we go back to that report from Adam Schefter, and he says that Parsons has been practicing and is trying to play in the opener against the Lions, though one source said still uncertain if he will. So here's the thing. It's only week 1, and yeah, you could say, well, it's only week 1. I mean, if he misses one game for the Packers, then they get 16 more of Micah Parsons, and that's still great for them, and that's still way better than anything they would have had. Now, if the Green Bay Packers were playing the Cleveland Browns in week 1, then you would certainly go, okay, well, I bet they can survive against one of the worst teams in the league. They are not. They, to honor Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend. You are playing the Detroit Lions in week 1. I mean, this is a team that it's going to come down more likely than not to the final week of the season in the NFC North. And when Parsons joins the NFC North, what was the thing that we talked so much about? Like, oh, well, this is huge for, these matchups with the Lions. And who did we say should be the most concerned about playing against Micah Parsons, other than, of course, Caleb Williams, who takes almost 70 sacks last year? But the teams that are truly competitive in this division, we said the team that should be more concerned, Lions versus Vikings, was the Lions, because they have these issues with the offensive line and they're trying to completely revamp it without Frank Ragnow, without Kevin Zeitler, that there's inexperience there. If Micah Parsons either is not 100% or doesn't play or is limited to whatever 20, 30 snaps in a game against the Detroit Lions where they could most take advantage. And I know they have good tackles, but Parsons is a guy who doesn't just attack the tackles. It could be a big deal if you lose a game because you can't pressure Jared Goff. And let's also remember that the gap between Jared Goff when pressured and when clean is insanely large because he's Jared Goff. That he's not a mobile playmaker, that he is a in structure, in time type of player. And few quarterbacks are better. Even the elite quarterbacks are not better than Jared Goff from a clean pocket when playing in rhythm. And who could disrupt that rhythm better than Micah Parsons? So if he does not end up playing in this game, that is a big factor going into this one. Long term, yeah. I mean, Micah Parsons will very likely be fine. He will very likely have an enormous impact on that defense. But in a division where every single game is a huge deal, every single matchup could determine who ends up in first place, second place, third place, it is big news that Micah Parsons, that there's any chance that he might not play on Sunday against the Detroit Lions. And a little later in the show, I want to go through every game in week one because we finally arrived, my friends, and can't wait to get football started. So I haven't looked. It's almost like you don't want to look if you know where your parents hid the Christmas presents. I haven't looked at the week one schedule yet. And so I want to do it like with you guys live here because I know who the Vikings are playing. I have a flight, I have a hotel, but I haven't really looked at the rest of the schedule. I mean, even when Green Bay was playing Detroit, it was like, oh, wow, wait a minute, hold on. They're playing Detroit week one. That is one heck of a matchup, and definitely must see who wins that one for the Vikings. And already week one starting to impact how this division ends up playing out. But if they can't do it with Micah Parsons and they don't have Kenny Clark, that is a pretty big issue for them. And look, I mean, I agree with, Jay Deasy. As much as you want him to have a nagging back injury, they wouldn't give up 2 first-round picks for a gimp. Come on. But yeah, you're right, though. You are right that they would not have done this if they did not know about this injury. I'm sure that they were informed in it. I'm sure when it sounds like Dallas is talking about a 5-day plan to get the inflammation to go down, that doesn't scream to me major back surgery. That doesn't scream to me, oh my gosh, like that he's going to be screwed for the rest of his career. But it definitely could make a difference when it comes to this week and this football game with the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers, especially with the way that they play. The way that they play, Detroit, is a lot of running the football and a lot of play action, a lot of Jared Goff sitting in the pocket. And we've seen over the last few years how good that offensive line is and how much of a major factor it is for Jared Goff's success in Detroit. It's no coincidence that when Jared Goff had his worst year in Los Angeles and they traded him to Detroit, that it went along with Los Angeles having one of the worst PFF pass blocking grades in the entire NFL. And then when Matthew Stafford gets there, they revamp that offensive line and it ends up being one of the better pass blocking lines in the NFL. But I think it inspired Sean McVay to make that trade in part because he knew if anything goes wrong with the offensive line and the blocking, Goff's just not going to be able to get you there. And he still won a playoff game that year, but he's just not that guy. And Stafford is somebody who can make up for that. So this to me is the potential major weakness of the Detroit Lions is their ability to pass block. And if Parsons isn't there or he's limited, it's just a different game because they don't have Kenny Clark. So not only would you be down a Parsons, but you're down Kenny Clark. And the other part of that matchup too, if Parsons isn't 100%, I could tell you what I wouldn't want to do if my back felt terrible because I had an epidural and I wasn't really 100%. I would not want to tackle Jahmyr Gibbs time and time again. I wouldn't want to match up against guards flying to the second level time and time again. And, well, that's what he is going to face with the Detroit Lions. Now, the downside to this, of course, is that if you're watching it from a Vikings perspective, the downside would be, well, if Detroit gets, a win there, someone's going to win and it doesn't help you. But I look at Detroit still as one of the best teams in the NFL, one of the best rosters in the NFL. And I've got Micah Parsons just a shade, not Micah Parsons. Well, they're going to be called Micah Parsons going forward. The Packers just below after getting Micah Parsons, just below Detroit. I think that's close. And after they got Parsons, I would have put it neck and neck with the Vikings and the Packers, and still Detroit deserves some benefit of the doubt for the last couple years that they would be the favorite there. And if they lose a game because they don't have Parsons 100% healthy or he's not playing, then it could matter down the road. So that is, I wouldn't call it, the biggest news that this is suddenly a bust trade, but I would call it significant that the Green Bay Packers traded for a guy that might not be able to help them in week 1. We will see how that eventually plays out. But imagine my surprise actually seeing that it was a real injury for Parsons. I guess we shouldn't always make the assumptions. And hey, look, that also happened with Josh Metellus. When Metellus had an ankle injury, he got his extension, and we all assumed that the ankle injury was the extension flu, and it turned out that he missed some time. So Jay says he'd sit Parsons week 1 if he was the Packers. Well, that's something that they have to consider as well. Green Bay also has to consider now the long term of this, and they would know better if it's something that could have long term. Again, like my medical advice is more or less only based on the football injuries that I've seen over the years and who comes back when and what they've dealt with and everything else. But if this ends up being something that he tries to play through and then further injures his back, well, then you could be talking about missing actual time. And he did miss some time with Dallas last year. So it does matter to some extent, and we'll see where it goes from there with his injury. I will get to your questions in a moment, but that's the number one news in the NFL today. It's like, wow, okay, Micah Parsons up in the air for week 1 with Packers and Detroit Lions. Also in Viking land, Anthony Barr announced his retirement, and that is a little bit on the weird side for me because Anthony Barr was a third-year player when I arrived in Minnesota in 2016 to start covering the Vikings. And he had just come off that huge 2015 season, and when the Vikings in that lead up to 2016 were being talked about as a team. How good can they be? Are they a Super Bowl contender yet? Anthony Barr was one of the main guys that everybody was talking about as a rising star. Now, 16 was a very gnarly season for Anthony Barr because he got banged up. And then Mike Zimmer kind of called him out, and the players were not happy at all with that because they knew that Barr was playing through injury, and that's why he wasn't performing the same. And then in 17, he was one of the centerpieces of one of the best defenses of that decade, number 1 against the run, number 1 against the pass, and part of the Minneapolis Miracle, part of the best Vikings team since 2009 at that point. I mean, a major part of it. And he was one of those guys that I think for me was always, and then there's after that, it becomes, he's still a big part of it in 19 where they win in New Orleans, and then that sort of ends that era. And he had signed the contract, so he stayed around, but a lot of the other guys left. Griffin, Xavier Rhodes, he almost went to be a New York Jet. Then he ends up coming back and staying with the Vikings. And a lot of the discussion after that was about his contract. He had the injury in 2020. And of course, every time his name comes up, people talk about the contract because that's what we do here. But I always found it very interesting with Anthony Barr that Mike Zimmer was extremely defensive when it came to Anthony Barr. In fact, one time we showed up randomly. Zimmer was not scheduled to talk. And then we were told, like, Zimmer wants to talk. Now, we're like, what? Zimmer wants to talk. Like, since when does Mike Zimmer want to talk to us, the media? And he goes up to the podium and he tells us all that our bogus rumors about trading Anthony Barr are totally false, and there is no way they are trading him. He's one of the favorite players of Zimmer, and you guys and your mongering. And we're like, us? Who did that? What? We had heard nothing. We had heard nothing. There was no Schefter. There was no Rappaport. There was no, then it was an investigation to figure out, well, who was talking about, social media is trying to trade everybody all the time. So Zim didn't see a tweet, did he? And it was, were they talking about it on the radio when he was listening in his way in, or did he because that was a time where they were negotiating the contract with Anthony Barr. And I think he may have missed a single OTA practice or something. So there may have been a little bit of speculation between, Anthony Barr and a trade. We may have talked about it a little bit, and whatever Zimmer heard set him off. And Zimmer, I think I asked him in that press conference because, Mike could oscillate between being very difficult when asked questions to also giving you a ton of insight. And this was one of those days where he was in a mood to give you the insight of why he loved Anthony Barr so much. So I think I asked him, like, well, Mike, why do you like Anthony so much? Like, why is this so important to you? Why would you care if anybody in the world was out there talking about trading one of your players if you're not trading him? And some of his explanation was really good, and it had to do with Anthony Barr as the quarterback of the defense. And I think when you look back at those defenses, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, there's a run there where they're in the top 5 in either points or yards every single year, including the year where they're number 1 in, both of those categories. And Barr, to him, was his voice on the field. And actually, Anthony talked about today how with Mike Zimmer that it wasn't even just like their relationship of the X's and O's, but when Mike needed the team to understand some sort of message, but maybe wasn't the best at conveying himself, then he could go to Anthony Barr and say, I need you to get this through to the players, kind of where I stand with something or the message that I want them to get, because Mike wasn't, as you guys know, the best communicator. He was totally the opposite of Kevin O'Connell. And there's a ton of value in that leadership, but also he was the one that was calling the plays on defense, playing the cat and mouse game. We talk about this all the time with Blake Cashman. Well, that was Anthony Barr before, and the entire defense was built around this concept of the double A gap blitz in passing situations, Anthony Barr reading how the offense was going to block, and then making a change in order to set up the offense. Remember how many times Danielle Hunter was blocked by a tight end and we would laugh at the other team? What are they doing blocking with a tight end? Well, a lot of that was them shifting their protection to try to help stop something that Anthony Barr was going to do there with the double A gap blitz. He was very effective in blitzing. He made a ton of great plays throughout his career. Maybe not quite as many splash plays as people wanted from him after 2015. But I remember looking at the numbers of him as a pass rusher, and he was, extremely effective. One of the smarter players that I've been around. I think that Barr never really wanted to be as open as he was with us today. Maybe that was, carrying Mike's message that didn't want the media getting too much information. But it was interesting to hear him reflect on what Minnesota meant to him. And that was really my big takeaway from today, is just how much this place meant to him. So here is Anthony Barr talking about that.
It's obviously really good to be back here. It's important to me to retire as a Viking because the community means so much. The franchise means so much. Franchise that changed my life. Coming here in May 2014 as a young boy, really trying to find his way. Playing the game he loves his whole life, and got a chance to showcase his talents here. So I want to obviously thank you to the organization. I will start by thanking the Will family, specifically Ziggy and Mark. In my mind, the best owners in sports. And I say that because while they field a competitive team on the field year after year, they do that with awareness and class. I don't think any organization does it quite like the Will family does. They are progressive. They're active in the community. Their efforts are local, national, and global. And they've created a culture of winning here, a culture that people want to come from all over. Free agents love coming here. I know you guys see the end-of-year reviews. The Vikings are always number one just because of how well this organization is ran. So big shout out to the Will family. I also want to thank Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman, the two people that played a big influence in my coming to Minnesota. Being drafted here as the 9th pick in 2014, they entrusted me with a lot. I had a lot of responsibility at the time. I remember actually in April of that year, before I got drafted. I was coming here for a top 30 visit, and this is when we were in Eden Prairie. And I was coming from California. I was in my, my T-shirt, my shorts, and I got off the plane and it's snowing. I'm like, oh damn! Like this place is different. I was like, okay, hopefully we don't come here because I'm not trying to be dealing with the snow in April. And then 6 weeks later, they called, and I was like, damn. But it ended up working out, and now I actually love the snow more than I do the heat. So that's kind of weird how that changed, being a Cali boy, but now I'm like full Minnesota.
There's Anthony Barr there talking about the organization and just how much it meant to him, and becoming a member of the Minnesota community. Said even that all the efforts that he makes with his foundation and things like that won't change now that he is retired and he's living in California. So I think that, any of those players from that era, and, Harrison Smith is still here, but any of those players from the defense specifically, you look back now and how long it took, and we would all, as we do, and it's football, and we nitpick contracts, we nitpick players, and we say, well, why wasn't Anthony Barr getting more sacks or more interceptions or fumbles or things like that? And then when it's gone in 2021, is he still there in 21? But it wasn't the same. And then 22, when it's gone, you can see how much all those guys were kind of glued together with each other and how they made each other better. They impacted each other. And he and Kendricks talked a lot about their friendship too. And those two linebackers were as good of a combination as existed in the NFL. 4-time Pro Bowler, really excellent player, but also I think a study for me personally in trying to find where that value was that maybe didn't show up in a general box score. And it starts kind of the discussion for me about how I used PFF and why I'm interested in analytics and why I wrote the book and all those things, because somebody like Barr, his PFF scores would kind of go up and down, and his box score stuff with sacks and splash plays, some years it was better than others. So why is it that this organization cares so much about him? Why does this coach love him? And why, with him in the lineup, are they consistently so good? And I think it came back to the leadership out there at that position. When you're the green dot guy, when you're calling the plays, when you are looking at the entire offense and having to play a cat and mouse game with an opposing quarterback, like there's a lot of value there. So I had a chance to ask Anthony about how he feels about the current group, because remember, he came back in 2023. So he got a look at Brian Flores, got a look at Kevin O'Connell, and here's what he had to say. When you were here in 23, what did you learn about Flores, Kevin O'Connell, kind of the state of the franchise and the leadership now?
Yeah, I really like where things are from obviously more outside perspective now. But when I was here in 23, the leadership I think was exactly where it should be. I think kind of with the times that we're in now, I think they fit perfectly. I think Kevin O'Connell is a great leader, very good communicator, obviously a very smart guy, and very relatable, someone that you could go have lunch with and, have an easy conversation with, but also demanding and knows his X's and O's and knows what he wants from his guys. And with Flores, it was kind of crazy. There was no playbook, when I got here. It was just like, yeah, we just kind of made up this defense. I was like, all right, well, how do I learn it? He's like, I don't know, just go out there and figure it out, I was like, all right, sweet. So that was different, but it was really cool. And I think the guys he has the guys now in place to go out and play his type of ball. And I expect the defense to be solid.
Do you still watch Vikings games as part of your Sunday routine?
For sure, yeah. That first year I wasn't playing, it was kind of like bittersweet because I was kind of like, man, I wish I was out there. But now I'm to the point where I'm just so at peace with it, and it's all love, and I really enjoy watching games now. It's not stressful anymore. Well, sometimes it is, but most of the times actually with the Vikings, every game is stressful, seemingly. But it's now I can really be a fan and put my purple hat on and be a homer and really support the guys.
Anthony Barr there. I also asked him if he had plans for a podcast or something, as it seems like all former players do. And he said maybe in the future. So possible future, we have Tuesday morning left guard that is returning tomorrow with Jeremiah Searles. Maybe it's, Wednesday evening Pro Bowl defensive guy talks about football. Someday, the offer's out there, Anthony, if you ever want to join the Purple Insider network of football men. But just congratulations to him on a great NFL career. You play in the league for that long, you play on top defenses. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of dedication. And he said, I asked him what he was most proud of, and he said basically that he showed up every single day on time and handled himself like a pro. And the rest is sort of, whatever happens, happens. And what a journey it was for the franchise during the time that Anthony Barr was here. And that's why it's kind of a reminder a little bit of how much is different now. And it feels like over the last couple of years that the Vikings have gone through this build similar to when they first drafted Anthony Barr. Now, they did that through the draft. The 2015 draft was obviously absurd. So they end up getting, Eric Kendricks and Stephon Diggs and Trey Waynes and Danielle Hunter, not in that order. And that's where they really build the defense. But Barr was a big centerpiece of that. And just a really, really good, solid dude in the community as well and with the media. So much respect to Anthony finishing up his career. So a little later on the show, I have a conversation with Arif Hasan. So that's going to come up later, where we talk about a little about Micah Parsons and then a lot about the biggest questions for the Vikings in 2025. Want to get you the FanDuel question of the day, which is later in the show. I'm going to go over all the week 1 matchups. And what I want to know is, what's your favorite one outside of Vikings and Bears? As I mentioned, I didn't look at any of the matchups because I want to go over them on the show and react to them like a kid on Christmas morning, like, oh, this is coming up this week and that's coming up this week. I've seen some of the commercials for the national games, but I don't know all the matchups because I wanted to have fun tonight and look at those. So right now, though, just a little peek of the national games. I mean, the Bills on FanDuel, 1.5 point favorites against the Baltimore Ravens. That's got the juice right there. But what's your favorite matchup coming up this week? Because, hey, you get a stress-free Sunday. My advice is to really breathe those in. You heard Anthony Barr. So when you are sitting on your couch watching the Vikings allow the Packers to come back and you need a Sam Darnold completion for them to close out a win, think Anthony Barr is feeling the same way as you on his couch in Los Angeles watching the Vikings game. So what's your favorite matchup for a stress-free Sunday that you get until then a very stressful, I'm sure, for you guys, Monday night? That is the FanDuel question of the day. So let me get to some of your questions, and then we'll bring in Arif in a little bit. Had a chance to have a conversation with him earlier on today, so I'll bring that to you. Chiefs Chargers from VA Vikings, Niners Seahawks from Cup of Joe Mama. That's a good one. Let's see, Mr. Marauder, Lions and Packers, of course, and then whoever the Raiders and Darnold are playing. Okay. Ravens and Bills by far. Ravens and Bills for expose is the answer there. Ravens and Bills. A lot of you agreeing with me. I mean, when you get a road team that's only a 1.5 point underdog like that, that it's close. And I think the home field advantage in the betting markets has changed over the years. It used to be 3 points. I don't think it's 3 points anymore, but certainly Packers, Lions, and Ravens, Bills is a really good one. I mean, Chiefs, Chargers, they always play great games. Chiefs and Chargers every single time. You know what? We should just look at this. If I didn't answer your question from earlier, just ask it again. We should just go through this right now. We should just go through it. Panthers, Jaguars. Hey, do not downplay the Hall of Fame game 1995 between the Panthers and the Jaguars when they both became franchises. There's some intrigue there. There's a little bit of intrigue there. In the UK, you'll be getting some sleep. Yeah, 49ers, Seattle is definitely intriguing. Bucks, Falcons. How about the NFL starting out with some of these division games right away? Commanders, Giants. All right, let's look at this schedule, and then you guys can continue with your favorites. Let me see here. Let's take a look at this. I got the FanDuel up here, so we got the odds for every game. And let's take a look at this. I'll give a 30-second take on every one of these games from this week, and then we could start getting excited about football. So Eagles and Cowboys is not one of the more intriguing matchups, I would not say, but I mean, what I'm really curious about is not so much if Dallas is good, because I think that they're okay, but I don't think that they're good. And their roster is just so much weaker than it was a couple of years ago. But what I'm interested in is just the vibe. Like, is Dallas, are they fighting? Are they melting? Are they looking like a team that wants it? Are they looking like a team that knows that you just traded their franchise player and they're just getting crushed by a Philadelphia Eagles team that's trying to repeat? Just the overall feeling of Dallas and Philly, I'm interested in. Chiefs and Chargers. I want to have a hot take that the Chargers will win the division. I want to do it. Like there's just that part of me that's like, let me just say it and see how it feels that the Chargers could win that division. And I don't think it feels terrible to say that. They have a really excellent defense. They're going to have a great running game. They've added to the weapons for Justin Herbert. I mean, Kansas City is still Kansas City, but those two teams, they play great games against each other. It's wrong to pick against Kansas City when they win that division every year, but I think there's a possibility the Chargers could get them, and that game could make a difference, that opener. And just to give you the odds here, the Eagles are a 7.5-point favorite as of right now. These things do change sometimes. Chiefs and Chargers, the Chiefs are 3-point favorite. Giants and Commanders, 6.5-point favorite for the Commanders. This one is, I think, quietly a very interesting game that I want to watch, because I think the Giants have improved a lot from where they were last year. It's just that we don't care about them because Russell Wilson is their quarterback. But if Russell Wilson does anything, that defense could be really good. I mean, they signed Javon Holland this year. They've drafted pretty well the last couple years. They might have one of the best D-lines in the NFL going against Jaden Daniels in year 2, but I don't know how much the Commanders really got better. I mean, they were in the NFC Championship, but did they massively improve? That game could be a good one. Carolina and Jacksonville is definitely a game, and the Jaguars 3.5-point favorites there. Carolina would be a popular pick for a team that overachieves this year and competes for a playoff spot. Jaguars, Liam Cohen debut. Well, that's one that you check in on the highlights. Let's see. Steelers and the Jets. And these times for the game is because I put in Arizona by accident. So that's why those times are funky. Steelers and the Jets, I don't have any interest in watching really at all, for pretty obvious reasons. Though, I mean, look, we all kind of wonder what Aaron Rodgers is going to look like as the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just that the Jets are in full rebuild mode. So that's not one that's too intriguing. Raiders and Patriots. I think the Raiders have a chance to be one of the more fun and entertaining teams in the NFL. They are 2.5-point underdogs to the Patriots in New England there. I think the Raiders are not a great team, but they could be very fun. They're the team that's gotten a lot of attention this offseason that will probably disappoint and probably win 7 games, but they'll win 7 games by ranking 26th in defense and 3rd in offense or something crazy like that. Drake May against the manageable Raiders defense and any 2024 quarterback we're going to be watching. Oh, Cardinals Saints. Just going to move on from that one. Bengals Browns. Just going to move on from that one. Dolphins Colts. This is going to move on from that one as well. I mean, I don't know. Is there something to talk about with any of those games? It just a lot of teams who exist. Bucks Falcons. Really want to see how Michael Penix comes out as the franchise quarterback now for the Falcons. The Bucks without Liam Cohen. Tennessee and Denver. Year 2 for Bo Nix. I mean, I'm interested in Cam Ward and his first ever career start. He's got to do it against a really good defense and a great secondary in Denver. 49ers Seahawks has a lot of intrigue there for sure, because Sam Darnold is new, because the 49ers have been kind of ripped apart over the last couple of years. And are they still good under Kyle Shanahan? Is Brock Purdy worth it? But Sam Darnold debut, definitely want to watch that. And I think all of you should appreciate what Sam Darnold was to the Vikings last year and what an entertaining season it was, because last year there was a lot of talk about, just kind of get through this season to McCarthy. And, it's not going to, maybe, you get to squeeze a little fun out of it. And Darnold did a great job overall. Packers and Lions, huge game. That's the one we've been talking about. 2.5-point favorite Packers at Green Bay. The Lions win that one. That's another thing about Micah Parsons potentially being out or limited in this game is it's at Green Bay. So if you don't win that one, if you're the Packers, then you're talking about going to Ford Field the next time you see the Lions. Low key, really good game. I think Texans and Rams. Texans will be a little bit better. Ariante Ursary, I think has won that job, the former Gopher in the offensive line. So that could be big for them. Matthew Stafford's going to play. Then Baltimore, Buffalo could be AFC Championship preview. And then, of course, the Vikings and the Bears. I mean, I give it like a 7, 8 out of 10 for the quality of the first week. I think that's a really good schedule for the first week. Maybe only 3 or 4 games that I'm not all that interested in. Okay, so questions, thoughts, feelings coming up at 8 o'clock. Arif Hasan is on the show, and we're going to talk a lot of Parsons and much more when he arrives about 8 o'clock. And make sure you're answering that FanDuel question of the day, your favorite matchup for week 1 as we finally get ready for some freaking football. Aaron says, saw the Raiders called the Cowboys about Parsons, but they were too late to the party. Parsons and Max Crosby would have been crazy. Yeah, from just what it sounded like from the reports, there was a couple of teams that at the final hour were putting together their offers, and then they just pulled the trigger and sent him to Green Bay. I think that my take on the Raiders, fun but probably not that good, would have changed if they got Micah Parsons. I would have said, I guess we got to take the Raiders seriously now that you have Micah Parsons there. But instead, they're just kind of another team in the league at this point. And I think they'll be entertaining. They'll be a team that you flip over to watch, that when they're on red zone, you're probably seeing something fun, but they don't win a whole lot. And I just don't know if Pete Carroll can really do it. I mean, not to be ageist here, but at some point it becomes difficult for somebody to still get an edge in coaching. And I don't think that Pete Carroll was getting an edge anymore at the end of his time in Seattle. So has he revamped things now in Las Vegas? I'm intrigued. Blowfish says, concerned that the team seems fine with having a 3rd-round rookie returning kicks and UDFA returning punts. Well, I don't know that there's ever been a team, and I don't disagree, but I don't know that there's ever been a team that the Vikings have had where every single player was proven and awesome. I mean, the 2017 team is close because you had still Marcus Sherrills returning. I don't remember. It must have been, who was kick returning? Because they let go Cordero Patterson. I don't remember who was kick returning in 2017. One of you guys will have to tell me who was returning kicks at that point. But I think we were getting toward the point where kicks were just not really that big of a deal for returning anyway. And this year they will be. And I think that that's where your concern is reasonable, is that Ty Felton, if he's going to be the kick returner, he's going to touch the ball a lot and he's going to have to make a lot of plays. But you're always going to have somebody somewhere in the lineup that you're a little bit concerned about, and you just have to roll the dice with it. Miles Price could be a difference maker as a punt returner, and that was missing with Brandon Powell. And they had all the chances in the world to have Brandon Powell come back, and they decided not to sign him. So I think if they had really needed him to come back and felt like they weren't confident in Felton and in Price, that they could have done that. That was a guy who was out there. Was Sherrills kick returning as well in 17? Name the starting corners from 17 is easy. That being Rhodes, Waynes, and Terrence Newman, with Mackenzie Alexander coming off the bench. But maybe it was Sherrills that was doing the kick returning back then. I don't remember an impact kick return in 2017. The Cordero Patterson, of course, that run was historic and incredible. Just probably should have kept him around in 17. Maybe that could have been a little bit helpful. But anyway, not the point. It's just that when it comes to these guys, sometimes it's like that, where you have to lean on, there's only so much money, there's only so many free agents, there's only you have to lean on somebody at some position. And if the least proven person out there on your team is your punt returner, well, that could cost you, but maybe rolling the dice there, that's something that they feel comfortable with. They're going to have to give it a try. I don't disagree on the nervousness when the kicks go off and the punts go off. But if you're going to have unproven guys, those types of positions are probably the spots where you're looking to have them, rather than say like going into 2020 with starting corners who were undrafted free agents or third round draft picks and just hoping and praying or something like that. Dusty says if Kansas City's receivers don't step up, could be a hard year for them. Refs really have to step up for them again. Yes, that's funny. Well, you have to listen to that Walt Anderson interview from last night where he was asked about, the league being rigged and so forth. But, the reason I think that everybody thinks that is because we all watch every Kansas City game and it's always on TV. And so if your team gets a call on a Sunday, you see how the refs deal with your team, but you're not watching every call in every single game. But we are with Kansas City because they're on national TV every game. So everything that goes their way, we're all going to, jump on it. But last year it was a little weird. They got a few calls that were very, very, very close. But to your point about the receivers, Rashee Rice, once he comes back, and that suspension for him was, I think, very, let's call it fair. This is the thing, right? If you want to talk about the league giving Kansas City advantages, I think the Rashee Rice penalty that he came away with for the crime committed, if they're going to do it that way, which they decided they were going to do it that way when it came to, the Jordan Addison situation and so forth. If you're going to do it that way and you're going to penalize guys based on what happens with the law and everything, only 6 games is pretty darn fair to Rashee Rice. They probably will be able to survive it and get through that. I just think this year could be an extremely tight race for the AFC West. Like, we're all talking about the NFC North and how nasty it is and how good it is and how it's the best division in football. I think the AFC West is probably raising its hand going, hey, if the worst team has Geno Smith as its quarterback and a Super Bowl winning head coach and Tom Brady doing whatever it is he does for the Raiders, maybe, that's a pretty darn good division. Denver's in the playoffs last year. The Chargers are in the playoffs last year. I think Denver and the Chargers both got stronger. So that's a really, really tough division for Kansas City this year, where in the past, you could argue, similar to the Patriots, you could argue there was a lot of years when Kansas City was running through that division where it wasn't special. It wasn't even good. Mr. Mayor, I've been thinking about facing Green Bay at the end of the season. Should we feel better about J.J. McCarthy being able to lock in with the offense, or worse about the chance of Darisaw or Kelly getting banged up? Yeah, it's absolutely impossible to know who's going to be in, who's going to be out at that point in the season. Green Bay will have guys that are injured too. So will everybody else you play along the way. But I think you would much rather play Green Bay at the end of the season because of exactly what you said, which is J.J. McCarthy will have an entire year. And if you look at Jaden Daniels, you look at C.J. Stroud's first year, Brock Purdy, you look at any of these young quarterbacks, a lot of times what happens is, they start off and sometimes it's rocky, sometimes it's good. And there's definitely a learning curve, hey, look, opposing teams are starting to know who you are type of curve, and they're game planning for you and they know your tendencies. And so there's a dip usually in the middle of the season where Bo Nix struggled, Jaden Daniels struggled, C.J. Stroud in his first year. And then a lot of times for good quarterbacks, it comes out the other side, like stronger, the adjustments get made, the growth happens. And then, Nix has an extremely good end of the season. So did Daniels. If that happens, then you're talking about it being a lot better to face those NFC North teams at the end of the season. I would much prefer that. In fact, mean, when is the Vikings' first division game? It doesn't happen until kind of the middle of the season, right? If I'm remembering the schedule correctly, it doesn't happen until the middle of the season. I think it's tough to have your first game be in the division. Blowfish says the way that Manning played on Saturday, he might have a Bridgewater fall in the first round of the draft. I think that there was a lot of overreaction to that game, to Arch Manning. He has not played a lot of football, and his first game is at Ohio State. And if you look at, now this show has not given Matt Patricia a whole lot of love in the past because I thought he was a horrendous head coach for the Detroit Lions, but he was a defensive coordinator and he was on Bill Belichick's staff when they won the Super Bowl. And he was running stuff that NFL teams run against the guy who's making, it's not his first start, I think, but one of his first starts. I'm not judging what's going to happen at the end of the year. Think about all the times that the quarterbacks we were told were going to be the top guys. How about Joe Burrow? The year he went number 1 overall, nobody even heard of the guy going into that year. And then all of a sudden he has this, big explosion that season. And then there were still some questions about that. Some questions about, well, is it a 1-year wonder? Was it just Jefferson and Chase? And then, he becomes an elite NFL quarterback who goes to the Super Bowl. There's a long way to go for Manning and for the LSU kid. And I'm not really a big fan of the Clemson quarterback, but I don't start draft work until February. So we'll see. I'll be interested to see where it goes from here, but there's other teams that were facing much easier competition with draftable quarterbacks. So we'll just give them time. Nobody, we want to always call it. We always want to overreact. It's just going to take time for him to get comfortable in that offense, I think. Rob says that he is interested in Jets Steelers to see how the Jets play for Aaron Glenn, to see how slow Rodgers is. Is Aaron Glenn more or of a loss than Ben Johnson? I think Glenn is in tough. It's a bad team. It's a bad quarterback. He's going to have to try to squeeze every ounce of blood out of that stone with the Jets and kind of hope that they can grind out some wins in a division that maybe isn't the strongest, but also isn't the weakest. I mean, I'm more interested in Rodgers. How does Aaron Rodgers look? All of the noise out of Pittsburgh sounds like Rodgers is a new man and he's a real leader now. But, they kind of tried to sell that on Hard Knocks with the Jets as well when he was there. And they kind of tried to sell that last year leading up like, oh, well, Rodgers is really committed after he had skipped minicamp. And, there was a little bit of water carrying of like, well, he had pre-planned his trip as if he can't cancel it, as if he's us, right? And you're like, well, I don't know. I mean, it's $900 is a lot to pay or something. I mean, he could have canceled the trip. It does seem that he has been more committed to Pittsburgh than he was in the past. But what does it really look like? That's a good point of like, can he make plays or not? Rob already thinking about the Browns and the trade deadline. Fair enough. Dusty says the Texans are trying to trade Cam Robinson. I think that based on the way Robinson played toward the end of the year and the fact that he lost out on that job, I just think he's not in a good place in the NFL right now. And I would just prefer to have what they have. Is he an upgrade over Justin School? Probably, but I don't know. I mean, is it worth anything to do? Maybe if they were really concerned about Darisaw, you could make that trade. They do love bringing players back, as we've seen. Maybe it's possible. Look, School had a really tough training camp. He also faced Jonathan Grenard every single day, which is not the easiest thing in the world. Rob says Seattle and the 49ers intriguing. How much of 2024 was Darnold? How much was the Vikings infrastructure? I will be watching a lot of Sam Darnold. I understand how it ended and how much bitterness there is toward how it ended. And that's fair because it wasn't just like losing one playoff game, which is hard enough. It was losing 2 playoff games. And who knows what happens if Sam Darnold shows up for that game in Detroit. And if he makes 2 or 3 throws in the red zone, if he hits that first pass to TJ Hawkinson early on, et cetera, et cetera. How different it could have played out for the Vikings. Although I think all's well that ends well with McCarthy as your quarterback, because if they ended up going 15-2 and they won a playoff game and went to the NFC Championship, then Sam Darnold's still your quarterback, my friends, and things are a lot different. So, maybe nature healed itself there with what happened, and the Vikings stayed on the path that they were always going to be on with J.J. McCarthy. But the way that Sam Darnold handled himself throughout all of training camp, all of minicamp, the way he led the team, the fact that that guy just got crushed by everybody. He's the biggest bust. He's terrible. They're going to win 6 games. I just thought it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal what he went through in his career. So to see him succeed was great. It was a great story. And if he continues to do it, it will be even better of a guy like Vinny Testaverde or Steve Young, who just had this really miserable start to his career and then turned it around. It will kind of be an inspiration for every quarterback that struggles early on going forward, for the Anthony Richardsons, the type. Yeah, Kit says, would you trade for Cam Robinson as a backup for a 7th rounder? How much did they pay him? I don't know. I feel like this team is in good shape now. There's probably not another move to make there. But if they were, let's say that the Texans can't make that happen, and then Darisaw gets banged up, that will be the best option. I didn't like how Robinson played down the stretch, but that would be the best option rather than playing Justin School. You can't play Justin School for more than a game, and Robinson would be someone that you could. So maybe they keep that in their back pocket. I don't know. Let me get back to your questions in just a minute, but couple of sponsors to remind you about. Our friends at ZipRecruiter. I know that a lot of you have businesses out there that listen to the show and you're maybe in a management position. Well, if that is you, then I know how hard hiring is for you. You have to sort through lots of resumes to find the best candidates, and a lot of people who are not qualified tend to apply. So it is going to make your life a lot easier if you use ZipRecruiter for your hiring needs. ZipRecruiter finds amazing candidates for you fast, and you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/audio. So give that a shot. If you are in a management position to hire, ZipRecruiter.com/audio. So easy. You got to try it. You can find great candidates fast, or use the invite to apply button that is there if you want to let certain candidates know that they can apply for your job. So ditch the other hiring sites. Let ZipRecruiter help you find what you're looking for. 4 out of 5 employers who use ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/audio. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Okay, let me get back to your comments there. Colton says, not too concerned with the cornerback room. I felt like we dealt with it last year and had a top defense. What are the most plausible moves to make for the Vikings if they want to address it? At this point in the game, it is for the cornerback room. To me, it's the trade deadline. Go through these first number of games, get a good sense of where your secondary is at. And then at that point, Jerick McKinnon return kick. Oh, okay. There you go. Jerick McKinnon. Totally blanked on that for him returning kicks. Thank you. But the cornerback room, go through these first 7 games, see where you're at. That gives you a pretty darn good look at just what Jeff Okudah is going to be, because we really don't know if Jeff Okudah is going to be good or not. I mean, he was very good in training camp, and he brought a physical nature to them that we haven't really seen from a corner since Xavier Rhodes. If he fits in that role and they feel good about their top 3, they feel good about where their safeties are at, then, I mean, you don't have to make a change there. But if somebody gets hurt and they're struggling and it's just okay or whatever, then, or it's not great and they're getting taken advantage of, or Rodgers isn't what he's, Isaiah Rodgers, what he's billed to be, then that's where you make a move. And this team has shown a very strong willingness to make moves in season with this team. Even Anthony Barr was talking about showing up in the middle of the season for this team. So, oh gosh, says, anybody else want to see how Travis Hunter handles corner and wide receiver? That's intriguing. Oh, I agree with that. That's a good point. That is a good point. I was too busy making the joke about the 95 Hall of Fame game. But no, that's right. And Bryce Young is a number 1 overall draft pick that everybody wrote off after last year and it looked like it was over. And then suddenly the light came on and he played very well. But even when you look at the numbers, him playing very well was still just okay. Is there another step for him with that team? Does he get it now with Dave Canales' offense? Or is he going to be kind of just a guy who was drafted number 1 overall? VA Vikings says, think Darnold will pick up where he left off last year. Rooting for him, sort of. Well, there is a Vikings-Seattle game that I think will be really interesting, or, maybe Seattle's just out of it at that point. The concern that I would have is that the offensive line is not very good in Seattle, but the Vikings offensive line down the stretch last year was also pretty bad, and they won a lot of games with it. VA Viking says, with the addition of Thielen, I think Naylor could return kicks or punts. Possibly. Did not like the way he returned a punt last year against Green Bay. That's for sure. That is definitely for sure. I'm not sure that that's in his skill set or not. They've done some work with him back there. I wouldn't want that to happen. I would not want one of your receivers that matter to be back there kick returning. I would not want that. Let's see. Dylan says, has the team asked or pressured you in any way to start calling Jefferson Jets so that there has not been internal that's a funny question. There has not been internal pressure. I will never call Justin Jefferson Jets. That's for fans. That's for him. That's for his teammates. That's for his coaches. I tend to, when it comes to nicknames, I'm just going to call the guys by their name most of the time. And I'm going to continue that trend with Justin. But for a long time, I called him JJ. So that is, just to shorten it up, even in an article or something, I might just write JJ just because, hey, Darnold, throw it to JJ. But can't do that anymore. That's too bad. But no internal pressure. There's not actually ever been any internal pressure. Just to tell you guys the complete 100% truth. The Minnesota Vikings have never pressured any of us to say anything ever. So definitely not that. Say or do anything. They have, though, helped us with pronunciations from time to time. That can be a little bit of, Aviante Collins, Aviant Collins. Brian Asamoah is what we understood, and then it was changed to Brian Asamoah. That's as much pressure as we get internally. Blowfish is impressed with the Gophers freshman quarterback. I did see some of the game, and he looked pretty good. That was against my University of Buffalo Bulls, though, so I don't know if we can judge yet. I like the turn. It's really interesting that PJ Fleck has seemed like a better fit for today's universe of college football when it changed over the last couple of years than he was the previous one. Like hype and motivation and all these sorts of things that seem to click with this generation of players. They've done a good job. They got a lot of talent on that team. Blowfishes says, media still pushing Rodgers being ambiguous with his retirement plans to play next season. He wants to be available to replace McCarthy. We'll see if he can get past week 1 because he wasn't able to do that a couple of years ago. I'm intrigued mildly by Rodgers. I put a bunch of things, maybe this is a show topic at some point, is I put a bunch of things into a category of make me care. This has always been my thought process. You guys know this about like undrafted free agents. They bring in 37 of them. I look at the guys, I look at their background, and I go, okay, make me care. Just for an example, Elijah Williams. I remember when they signed Elijah Williams, I mentioned it on the show, and I was like, oh, this guy's got a lot of production. And then I was like, all right, well, let's get back to talking about Javon Hargrave, right? But then made me care. I feel that way about a lot of stuff in the NFL this year. Maybe you guys too. You can throw those in your comments if you want. Of like, who's got to make you care? The Bears, to me, are the ultimate make me care team. If they beat the Vikings week 1 and Caleb Williams is awesome, like, okay, you've got my attention. The same thing for, I think a lot of teams in the league, including the Steelers, because I have the Steelers as a 8 or 9 win team that's occasionally good, has a nasty defense, And that's probably not going to be enough. And a lot of it sounds just like the Jets last year. Man, their defense is so good. Okay, that's great. But Rodgers is not the same version of himself. And the team is falling apart from the inside. And okay, Jets were not a team to care about. I think Pittsburgh's better run, better coached. They can make the playoffs with, Mason Rudolph, and they can have a winning record with Duck Hodges or 500 or whatever it was. So, all right, well, Kenny Pickett a couple of years, they can do that. So they deserve more of the benefit of the doubt than the pathetic Jets. But make me care about you as a contender. Like, let me check in on Rodgers after 6 weeks, see where he's at. Because if they win week 1 in a very winnable game, it's going to be Rodgers is back. He's newly committed. Like, this is his year, all that sort of stuff. I want to wait till I get to that point. Jay says Bengals Vikings week 3 will be a big game for the Vikings. We have history of losing to the Bengals, and the offense had the most points this year. It will. That might be the first kind of shootout type of test. Although, Atlanta too, this defense, we're going to find out within the first 3 weeks where this defense really is for the Vikings. Week 1, if you go and you bash Caleb Williams' face in, you intercept Michael Penix a couple times and beat the Falcons and then play Cincinnati and hold them under 30, then you've got a pretty darn good defense to start with. If Caleb Williams thrives and then Penix comes in and uses all of his weapons and they run the ball well and all that, and then you play Cincinnati and Burrow lights you up in US Bank Stadium, you're going to feel a lot different about that defense's high end and their potential to stop top teams. So these first 3 weeks are going to tell us a ton. Dusty says Shanahan could be surprise hot seat coach, aging roster with a lot of bloated contracts if he misses the playoffs. I agree with you. I think Shanahan has been one of the best coaches in the NFL over the last 10 years. But what do we say? It's not football season until someone says it's a what have you done for me lately league. But that's how windows work. They extended their window. They extended their window for several years where they could win a Super Bowl potentially. They didn't get it done. But when you get 4 or 5 shots at potentially winning a Super Bowl, you got a great head coach. But that doesn't mean that you want to stay on that path when you've had to rebuild it, and they seem to refuse to rebuild it. So John really not buying into the Sam Darnold hype, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Would Darnold and KOC be geniuses if they were on the Browns last year? Well, if he could play Darnold and not Deshaun Watson, I think the Browns would have been pretty good last year, but I don't know. I mean, you could say that from any coach. If they had the worst team in the league, would they be any good? Like, no, probably not. Probably not. Bill Belichick, when he lost Tom Brady, wasn't a genius, but I also think that every single thing that Sam Darnold did last year was not fake. It was certainly assisted by having Justin Jefferson and the coaching and the weapons that he had. But those throws that Darnold made were not made up. It wasn't Case Keenum. It wasn't like he just threw the ball up into the atmosphere and then they ran the ball most of the time. He put a lot on his shoulders and made a lot of plays. I think he can be a very good quarterback for Seattle, but I don't have him as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And I also think that just in general, you should want Sam Darnold for this. That was a really, really entertaining season and a great performance that he put on, even though knowing that he wasn't going to have a future in Minnesota. So Jay Deasy says Jeff Okudah is this year's Darnold. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, the reclamation project. Yeah, I mean, maybe he certainly looked that way. He certainly looked the part in training camp, Jeff Okudah, where he was pretty good. Rob says last year Morrow had 100 snaps at CB4. I think he would be option 6 or 7 behind. I don't think Tavier Thomas is a corner. I think he is a special teamer only. I don't think Jay Ward is a corner. I think that McGlothern is next man up, and then probably Morrow. Those other guys, Jay Ward has never played corner for the Vikings at all. I mean, not this year, not last year. in training camp. We've only seen him at safety. Tavier Thomas is a special teamer. I can't see them playing him unless it was a panic type of situation. Mama says, is Jerry Jones' reasoning for them not being able to stop the run valid for trading Micah Parsons? Not really, no. I mean, two things can be, well, things can have shades of truth, but not have validity, right? Micah Parsons is a pass rusher. There's no question about it. His PFF history as a run defender is average, and he sells out to try to get the quarterback, and that's what a lot of pass rushers do. He's not an elite run-stopping edge rusher. That is a fact. And also Dallas has been horrific at stopping the run. Horrific. They drafted, Maisie Smith, and they've tried a bunch of different stuff in the interior. They've just been awful at stopping the run. Is that a reason to trade one of the 5 to 7 best players that aren't quarterbacks in the NFL? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What's Dante Hall doing right? Oh, goodness. I've got a Greyhound dog playing around here next to me. Sorry if you guys are hearing that. He's screwing around. Oh, I know why. He threw his toy over here. There you go. Okay, that might be time to bring on the Arif Hasan interview, because I think the Greyhound here, Mr. Buddy, is in need of going outside. I'm getting that sense from him. So I will check back and answer. He's going crazy down here. I'll check back. And also Arif, you'll hear on the interview, had some dog interaction as well during our conversation. So why don't I first tell you guys about another sponsor of the show. The episode today here brought to you by Denisa Tova and her team at Tova QDRO and Retirement Valuators. If you guys are like me and your only knowledge of the lives of lawyers and judges is based on watching Law and Order, then there is a great podcast for you guys to hear about the real lives of people in the law sphere. Denisa Tova's Beyond the Bar podcast, not deep in the weeds lawyer talk, but real conversations with judges and lawyers about what life is really like working with the law, what makes them laugh, what drives them, what their real life work-life balance is like in working in law. And every so often, Denisa will have a surprise guest like myself because she is a fan of this show. So Beyond the Bar is like a locker room regroup with folks from across the legal field, sharing how they got into the game, what they tell rookies, and navigating this post-pandemic AI everywhere legal landscape. And off the mic, Denisa runs a forensic retirement lab. If you are a divorce lawyer and your clients have a 401k or IRA, it was around before the marriage, then now it's all blended together. Well, she and her team can help you untangle that. You'll want to find Denisa's Settlement Language Lab, a free session for law firms, like a training camp for retirement drafting. So if you want in, go to her LinkedIn, Denisa Tova, and let her know you heard her on the show. And also that you'd like to get yourself that settlement lab. So thanks very much for Denisa, for her great support of the show. I'm going to let out this animal. And here is myself and Arif Hasan discussing Micah Parsons and the biggest questions facing the 2025 Minnesota Vikings. All right, we welcome back into the show from the Wide Left newsletter, wideleft.football. You know him so well, Arif Hasan. And Arif, there is a rule about barking dogs on the show, I hope you know, which is you have to make dog puns if you have a barking dog on the show. So you started right off with it. So that's where you're going to have to begin.
This is going to be impossible.
To make dog puns in a football conversation, I don't think should be all that challenging.
I just made one. Come on, I just made one. You gotta pay more attention. Impossible. Come on.
What?
Paw.
Oh, paw. Okay. All right.
See?
Well, we're off the rails already, and it's only been 40 seconds. So, Arif, here's where I really wanted to begin, if not for all of that, which was, so the Packers got Micah Parsons, and I've also got a game for you a little later. We're going to have fun with Vikings questions for 2025, but you wrote about Micah Parsons and the Green Bay Packers, and how about the news that the back injury was real? That was pretty shocking.
That was nuts to me. I was like, wait, hold on.
Never saw it coming. I thought it was like a TJ Hawkinson inner ear thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I guess hold-ins are only so real. But let's assume that they fuse whatever L4 and L5
Sure.
back together, and it's just he's Micah Parsons
Right. It is
going
not a
forward.
tweak. Right.
Right. I don't think that the Packers make this trade if he was just completely broken and couldn't play football anymore.
Right.
So let's assume that he's still good at football. What you wrote about over at Wide Left was the value of one player being acquired by a team. So how much does Micah Parsons change things for you? He certainly changed it in the betting market, but how much does he change things for you with the NFC North?
I think it changes things a lot. So I don't know if I would. Hold on. Uh, sorry about that. No, I don't know if I would react as strongly as the market did. They made the Packers the favorites to win the division. I don't know if I'm there yet, but I think that it does speak to kind of the nature of the player that he is, because one of the Packers' biggest problems has been the pass rush, and they've been always trying to like find some way around that, right? You know, adding Devontae Wyatt, they got Lucas Van Ness, and Rashawn Gary just never materialized into the player that he was always almost going to become, right? Like he's about to break out, or you take a look at this like 4-game sample, he was fantastic, and it just never materialized. Well, now you've got a player that has the ability to provide instant pass rush, and in a way that I think not a ton of other players can do, which opens up a lot of options in terms of alignment, coverage, fronts, and stuff like that. You know, we talk a little bit about like Zadarius Smith, another former Packer, who has the ability to like rush from the B gap and spin and stuff like that. And it's like that, but on steroids, not to make any accusations. But like there's so much more that Micah Parsons can do, and he can line up in that A gap on 1st and 10 and actually make a huge difference both as a run defender and as a pass rusher. And you can drop him into coverage, and it's not like, you know, when the Vikings would drop Neil Hunter into coverage, which more often than not was fine, it worked, but like he's not a coverage defender. He just has to be good enough for the disguise to work. Parsons is good at coverage, and he could just be a linebacker, and so there's a lot more versatility that you can provide, and that I think kind of supercharges the Packers defense in a way that you wouldn't get with a ton of other players. They've been a very, I don't want to call them a static defense, but somewhat predictable defense after the first second of the snap, and that has been an issue for them, and people have been able to exploit it, throw away from Xavier McKinney and stuff like that. And now I just don't think that's going to be the case. I think that they can be a lot more versatile, just like Jeff Hafley was at Boston College before he joined the Packers. So there's a lot here that really helps the Packers out a lot.
I think so too, and I know that Vikings fans don't want to hear that about how much one player can impact, but you know, it's funny because I was at the Anthony Barr retirement press conference earlier, and I know, right? I was thinking about how Anthony Barr affected the game in some ways that you can't really quantify or put a PFF grade on, which of course Micah Parsons has insane every number that you can find, but there was even trickle down effects of with Anthony Barr, for example, like his ability to rush the passer or his ability against tight ends with his size and things like that, his communication ability. And there are trickle down effects to certain players. It's not that Barr was Parsons. They're two very different guys, but it kind of allows other people to be the best version of themselves. So just for example, with those old teams with the Vikings, Xavier Rhodes, if he could guard Antonio Brown for the entire game, then you can help Trey Wayans all game long. If you can leave Christian Darrisaw alone one-on-one with edge rushers, then you can help Brian O'Neill with Josh Oliver on the other side, or you can provide some help into the middle and the interior. It's just, there is impacts. And with Micah Parsons, Rashawn Gary, I don't know how you're double teaming him at any point. There's so much attention, and the fact that he can line up into different spots, I think makes a huge difference there. And from a even broader sense, Arif, I just thought when you looked at the Packers roster, it was like, oh, that guy's okay. Oh, that guy's pretty good. Oh, he's been all right. But there was no one that made you think this guy is going to be a reason you go and play for a championship. And now they have one. I don't know if they have enough to compete for a championship, but they at least have that one guy who can drag you, who can kind of win a game by himself at times.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, we're both more familiar with the Vikings than with the Cowboys, but I think Anthony Barr is a really great example of what kind of the network or downfield effects of that can be. There are two elements of Anthony Barr's play that I thought made him such a special element to the Zimmer defense that I think might kind of help people understand how much one player can do. One, even as his numbers as a pass rusher went down, his like blitz pressure rate went down. It didn't matter because what ended up happening is that opponents just assumed he was going to blitz and assumed that that was going to be a threat. And because of that, they always assigned a blocker of some sort, whether it was a tight end or a running back or even just a guard to block him. And a lot of times he just wouldn't, right? He'd just drop off the coverage, fine, whatever. But that created one-on-one pass rushing opportunities for everybody else. And so you could rush 4 and only be blocked by 4, which is crazy. It's such a huge advantage. And the second one is that his athleticism to get down to the sideline answered the most common response to Zimmer's favorite look, the double A gap look. You throw screens against that because you have no idea how the protection is going to shake out. So you just don't bother with that. You know there's 6 defenders at the line of scrimmage. So you know there's just not as many tacklers to get to the screen. So you throw a screen, and if Anthony Barr can get to that, screen receiver 1 yard down the field, that eliminates the most common response. And so it makes the whole defense more effective, even though he didn't have to be the best player on the defense. And now you take that kind of guy, we'll have different network effects, right? We'll have different downfield effects because he does some things. And also he's the best player on a defense. Like that is, I think, remarkable and outstanding. And I think we're going to see, a player like Xavier McKinney, get more like all-pro votes or look like a better player, even though he's not really going to change necessarily, just because, hey, one great way to beat the Packers is throw away from Xavier McKinney, or when he's deep downfield, which, he's really good at, you throw over the middle. It's kind of harder to do that when one of your pass rushers can turn into like Fred Warner just on a snap if you need him to. So, the effects of one player pretty rarely create kind of this whole element that changes the nature of the defense, but in some cases absolutely do and can alter the dynamic. Like I think a lot of the film that a lot of people have built over the Packers over the past year about what that defense was going to look like, a lot of that's not going to be very helpful because I think if I'm Jeff Hafley, I'm like, screw that, right? I'm going to do all I've got a week to install a whole new defense and I can do it. I'm going to absolutely, manipulate all of these offenses and make sure that they don't know what they're looking at and punish them for it. Plus, I mean, the Packers were like 24th in pressure rate or whatever, like just on a bare, even if you don't do anything special with them, which you should, but if you don't, they're going to start being one of the better pass rushing units in the league from day one.
And I think where Parsons really benefits them is that he can rush toward anyone as well. Like you mentioned him dropping back, but he can line up in different spots. He can rush over the guard. They can do stunts with him to get him the matchup that they want. And it's not like he is a pure edge rusher that just needs to be bending and it's him versus Darisaw the whole game, and that's the only thing it's going to be. I mean, it's kind of like, they wouldn't really do this a ton, but every once in a while, San Francisco would just put Nick Bosa on the other side or put him over the guard, and you'd be like, oh, what is he doing there? But not a lot. I mean, he was it's him versus your right tackle, and they were trying to win that matchup. But in this situation, he might be attacking Donovan Jackson 10 times in a game with the way that they can just sort of have an undefined where he lines up and things like that. I was looking through his career, and 2 years ago when he had his best season, he lined up as a regular linebacker over 100 times, which means several times a game. You're like, he's right in front of me if I'm the quarterback. So then the bigger picture question is, and this has been my take on it, Arif, has been, well, the Minnesota Vikings built their team to play against good teams that have good players that go to all pros and lead playoff teams. And think about who they had in mind when they built this team. The Los Angeles Rams, who have Jared Verse and all those guys on the D-line, that's who they were thinking of. So they should be built to be able to handle this. It doesn't change my expectation for the North, but I think it's a 3-team race that I could see any of the 3 teams finishing first, second, third, and I could definitely see all 3 teams, and obviously I'm referring to Detroit and not Chicago.
Right.
Feel free to prove it, Chicago, but you won't fool me. But not unless Chad Hutchinson plays the Vikings, then they're in trouble. But, just in general, those 3 teams to me, when you put them down on paper, are about as even as it gets.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's the case. Obviously, a lot depends on like how good JJ McCarthy actually is and all that. But I think fundamentally, the NFC North is wide open. I was taking a look at a couple of my colleagues' like season predictions, which like who knows, right? But almost all of them had 3 NFC North teams in the playoffs, right? And that, I think that tells you a lot about the way that we've been evaluating all of these teams. There's a lot of respect for actually all 3 coaches, Matt LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell, Dan. I just think that it's really difficult to really see how the season's going to play out, and having players like Micah Parsons, Christian Darrisaw, Aiden Hutchinson, like having all of them in the division really, I think, alters the landscape for how the division plays out and how we can expect this to go. I don't think I would be surprised by any of those 3 winning, any of those 3 ending third. It's going to be a pretty fascinating watch in a way that like a lot of these other divisions around the league just aren't.
Right. When you go AFC North, like there's no scenario that you could talk yourself into where the Cleveland Browns are one of the best teams in that division. Whereas this, everybody except I just can't get there with the Bears until they make me get there. But any combination of these 3, and there's also enough intrigue when it comes to the questions, which is what we're going to get to here. For each team. I mean, Detroit's changing coordinators, and Jordan Love, to me, has not taken the next step. And Drew McGarry was on the show the other day and pointed out, like, what is he going to be like 32? And people will still be talking about, like, but next year, he could take the next step. But the steps that he's already made have put them in the playoffs multiple times. So that's enough to at least determine what his floor is going to be. And then with the Vikings, I mean, we're going to get to these questions, but it really comes down to McCarthy, the age of the players, the health, and can it all kind of stay glued together? Because we have seen seasons with a lot of hype that did not stay glued together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, again, you take a look at kind of the division breakdown, you take a look at kind of the person to person, like, you see like Jared Goff and you understand like, hey, he's a really talented quarterback. He's done a lot here. He's finally earned like so much respect from his peers that he's like a top 15 NFL top 100 guy. But we know that he's limited in some ways too, right? And so we know that, he can play an offense really well when it's scripted well, when the reads are there for him. We'll see what happens when the coordinator change kind of changes the way that he's looking at these offenses or looking at these defenses and figuring out kind of what his progressions are. But you know that he's got a ceiling and he's got a floor. And with Jordan Love, I think it's kind of both are a lot wider, right? That, in a single game, Jordan Love can put together some of the worst performances you've ever seen and some of the most outstanding performances you've seen. We saw that again in the playoffs with him. And generally speaking, the Packers were like 8th in EPA last year or something like that. They're a top 10-ish offense generally. And so you expect that. And again, with McCarthy, kind of like what that ceiling could look like. You've got a pretty good idea of how that plays out in a world where everything kind of comes together. You've got a pretty good idea of how that plays out when it doesn't. So there's a wide range of outcomes just from the quarterbacks alone, and seeing kind of how stacked the rest of these rosters are. That if one of these quarterbacks hits a streak of it doesn't have to be great, pretty good play, the rest of the roster, if healthy, is going to take whichever team that ends up being, all the way, maybe even to the top seed, but certainly, to win the division and get some pretty favorable matchups in the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's why my Micah Parsons take overall was kind of like, well, welcome to the superstar party, Green Bay Packers. The Detroit and Minnesota have been here, and I don't think Chicago at this moment has anyone. I mean, Jalen Johnson maybe would be put in that category, but I mean, mega star Jefferson, Hutchinson, like that is Jahmyr Gibbs. Totally next level type of top 10 players.
Multiple players that have competed for either offensive or defensive player of the year in each of those 3 teams. Like, I like Jalen Johnson a lot. He's really good, but that's not the category he's in, at least not yet.
Right. And yeah, and that's another part of why they have to prove it. Plus, their camp seemed kind of insane. So here's what I did, Arif. I put together 10 questions for 2025, the biggest 10 questions for the Minnesota Vikings 2025. But the thing is, there's no way we have enough time to get through 10 questions. So what I want you to do is I want you to decide, I'm going to read you the question and you can play or pass. You can either take the question or you can say, you know what, go on to the next one and we'll get something else going. So let's start with this. The biggest question I think is pretty obvious, which is how far can JJ McCarthy take the Minnesota Vikings? Do you want to play with that or you want to go to the next question?
It'd be so funny to pass on this one. I don't know that I would reasonably project him to take the Vikings all the way to the Super Bowl, but like I think that everything kind of falls the right way. He has like a CJ Stroud type season with this. I mean, because that Texans roster, Stroud's rookie year was like very good. With this roster, if he has a season like that, that to me is a team contending to make the championship round, right? Contending to win the conference. Again, that's the high level, 95th percentile outcome. I don't want to say that that's the best, but if we're asking how far can he take this Vikings team, one that has one of the best players at offensive tackle, the best player at wide receiver, a very good receiving group, and possibly, again, another top 3, maybe top 1 defense. I mean, how far can you take a team like that? Pretty far. So I think that kind of at the maximal level, yeah, that's a team that has the ability to contend all the way for the NFC Championship.
So I came up with an answer to this question midway through the, June or something, as we're kicking around all sorts of random different stuff of, well, how good would JJ McCarthy have to be this year to get to the outcome that we're talking about? And I can never say win the Super Bowl because look, this franchise has had so many great teams that just, we'll see if they get to that, range. But if you reach the divisional round, I think that's a pretty darn successful season. That means you're one step away from the NFC Championship. Everybody gets A grades at that point if you can reach the divisional round and then let, football Jesus take the wheel from there. But when it comes to McCarthy, the answer I came up with is he has to be the 11th best quarterback in the league. With this team, with this group of weapons, because when I envision the 11th best quarterback, I see someone who is good enough to get a lot done, good enough to be a playmaker, good enough to make all the throws, but is not going to be Lamar Jackson, where just by having Lamar Jackson puts you within striking range of the Super Bowl every single year, or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. I see it as he has to be that second tier type of quarterback, because I think if it's beyond that, then I'm not sure he'll be able to do everything they need him to do to be great within this offense with Jefferson and maximize Addison and Hawkinson and all those weapons. So that's kind of been my answer. Where would you put it? Like how good he has to be?
11th is so specific, but I like that.
It
puts him in kind of that range. In my opinion, just below Justin Herbert, but I am way higher on him than most people. But like the healthy Matthew Stafford, the way some people rank Jordan Love, puts him in that range, like below Justin Herbert, maybe below Jalen Hurts, but in the kind of Matthew Stafford. There's not like a ton of quarterbacks that kind of occupy this area. Maybe Jared Goff, actually. This area where it's like, yeah, no, that's a quarterback that can take you really far. You're not gonna, look at that team and say that guy's driving the wins, but he might get a couple of fourth quarter comebacks, and so you understand that he's a critical component to their success. I think that, yeah, I would like if I were to pick a rank, probably I would have picked something like 12 or 13, and that's not meaningfully different than what you chose. So, yeah, I like that answer.
I did come up with it somewhat analytically. I went through the playoffs last year with 3 different catch-all statistics: PFF grade, ESPN's QBR, and then quarterback rating. And I took the averages of all of those and then put it together to come up with 11th. And that's why. So the average quarterback that made the playoffs was 11th by all of those metrics jammed into a pot. If he's an average playoff quarterback, they've got just as good of a chance as pretty much anyone. So the next question is, how will JJ McCarthy be viewed when 2025 is over? Would you like to play on that one?
No, pass. On? No, pass.
Okay, that sounds good. How will Kevin O'Connell handle JJ McCarthy? Kid gloves or all in?
Oh man, he's an all-in kind of guy. I think that part of the reason that he wanted a bridge quarterback in the first place before he was kind of forced into it is because he wants quarterbacks to take on a significant role within the offense. Changing plays at the line, calling protection, stuff like that. But also, like, he puts a lot cognitively on quarterbacks, which is like crazy considering his like most famous like quarterback coaching success is Joshua Dobbs' story, where he didn't have the ability to put anything on that guy. This is not me calling Joshua Dobbs dumb, but like you understand, well, like he just showed up that day.
He was an astronaut. I do think that the Sam Darnold story superseded the Josh Dobbs.
Yeah. But like but yeah, like I think that you take a look at like the way, for example, that Kirk Cousins talked about the offense when he first came in, and he was like, "Yeah, I have to break the way that I go through progressions because I have to, you know, change my timing and hold on to that first read for a little bit longer because that first read is going to be an explosive play." And you just kind of understanding that because the offense kind of hunts for explosives, which for some reason, I feel like that's not the reputation it has, which I don't know, they led the league in explosive plays last year, right? But they hunt for explosives, and that's obviously tough to do. If it was easy, a ton of teams would do it. It's really difficult. It's much more convenient to like be a Shanahan McVay style coordinator and just press the easy button a million times a game. And, you know, that produces some very efficient and effective offenses. It's won a Super Bowl. It's gotten to like 3 or 4 of them, right? But I think that the way this offense works, the way that Kevin O'Connell, you know, conceives of offensive football, it requires the quarterback to be aware of where those explosives might be, to be aware of how to change plays, to understand that like the protections are on them in ways that are just like not true. I think he's just not wired to do the kind of the Madden controller thing that a lot of the other Shanahan style offensive coordinators seem to enjoy.
So what I would like to see from him is a little bit from bucket A and a little bit from bucket B. You don't have to be Matthew Stafford 2021 throwing for 5,100 yards and leading the NFL in interceptions and pushing it down the field and throwing to Cooper Kupp 750 million times. You don't have to throw 700 passes if you're JJ McCarthy. But I also don't think you have to dink and dunk and only use play action and treat him with kid gloves. And I keep going back to, I think we talk about McCarthy this way sometimes, like, let him manage the game. And I've done this as well. Like, man, you know, let him play Alex Smith, and I think they'll be in the playoffs. And I think that that's true. And that's not even an insult because Alex Smith won a bleep ton of games in his career and was a few plays away from reaching a Super Bowl early in his career with a great team. So if he does that, I'm not going to be against it. But I think that there is a know when to push the gas pedal down, depending on the looks that you're getting, the game situation, and also reading how JJ McCarthy looks. And this is where I think he actually did miss the boat a little bit with Josh Dobbs, which was Dobbs looked confident in the first couple of games, well, other than the crazy game, but then he looked pretty confident against New Orleans. And then it was starting to get a little shaky and opposing teams started to figure some things out. And then it was really shaky against Chicago. And he just kept being like, pass more. I think that's the way to do it in that game. And that one really sticks in my brain because I thought this is the one you have to treat Josh Dobbs like he's a backup quarterback and you're still pushing it. And that happened with Nick Mullins at times as well. And so if you do that with JJ McCarthy, and you could even make this case for the playoff game and week 18 too. It was just like, we're throwing with Sam Darnold like he is, you know, Justin Herbert or something. And he just wasn't in those circumstances. And there wasn't like a switch that they could flip. And I think they built the roster this offseason to have a switch. Do you want to push it or pull it, whatever you do with a switch, or not? Would you like, because Jordan made anything that you do with a switch to turn it on. When it clap on, clap off, Jordan Mason, right? Like how that's what I would like to see from him. I think this is going to take a lot more feel to deal with a quarterback of this lack of experience, because there might be some days where it's great and it's all working, and there might be other days where it's not, but you have answers for that.
Yeah, no, I think that that's the appropriate, approach here. I just don't know if Kevin O'Connell is wired that way, which, like, you know, anytime like you take a coach as well respected as Kevin O'Connell with the history of results that he has, and you're like, I don't know that he coaches this particular aspect the right way. You do have to take a step back and be like, am I wrong here? That guy knows way more about coaching. But I think that that's fair, right? Like, I think we can both say he's an outstanding, extraordinary coach, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And hey, this is probably an area where maybe he has to do a little bit more introspection about the way that he approaches young quarterbacks or quarterbacks who are struggling, or quarterbacks who don't really have the full range of tools that you expect a starting quarterback to have. And I think that, you know, for a young player in his first year as a starter, you do want to just at some times be like, hey, look, we're not going to get an explosive. They're running like quarters the whole game, and they're trying to like tricky with the way the safeties are aligned, and we just have to get a couple of yards here. We'll run the ball a bit. We'll, throw some slants. We've got some really fast receivers, so one of those slants might turn into an explosive. But we'll let the explosives find us instead of the other way around. And that would probably be an appropriate approach in some of the games. Would have been a great approach in some of these Sam Darnold games. Like even like the Jacksonville Jaguars game, that would have been outstanding, right? Because Jacksonville didn't do anything that they were doing on film earlier, and Darnold just collapsed, right? And so just letting the game kind of come to you a little bit would have been appropriate, and it would have been kind of a nice way to keep this guy's confidence up, which was, it turns out, in shorter supply than we had hoped. So
right, yeah.
I think that you're right. I don't think, without a little bit further evidence, that is going to be how he approaches it.
Well, and there have been plenty of coaches who have been this way. I have kind of comped him, Kevin O'Connell, to Bruce Arians, where it's a lot of the no risk it, no biscuit. Like, I'm all about the QB, and I'm just going to put it on you and go figure it out, kid, which could result in some really, that's what it was with Darnold, some really spectacular moments and then some very head-scratching ones, but the ultimate results were fantastic overall. And so I think that O'Connell, there's got to be a part of him that if he hears this conversation, he would be like, I don't know, guys, I won 14 games last year. I'm 31-11 with my starting quarterback. But JJ McCarthy is a new guy. It's a new season. And I think you have to handle each one of those situations individually. And also, even Darnold struggled with the number of pre-snap motions. At one point, Justin Jefferson went to O'Connell and said, dude, let me just win my matchup. It'll be fine. Like, you don't have to motion me every single time. You don't have to put that much on Sam. So there might be a little bit of let me play with the new toy. But the point on McCarthy was, it's a 5-star recruit. It's a first-round draft pick. He's been through an entire year of seeing the NFL from the inside and learning the NFL. I don't think that it has to be treated like a 20-year-old from Michigan. Like, it's just been a long time since the world has seen JJ McCarthy. He's a lot different than he was when he walked off the field in December 2023 as a national champion. Let me move on to the next question. And once again, you can play or you can pass. What will the target distribution look like for the Vikings weapons? You want that one?
No.
Okay. What does the backfield look like? Is it 1A or 1B for the Vikings backfield?
I think that you'll get like 60% of the running back touches given to Aaron Jones. I almost said Dalvin Cook there. Given to Aaron Jones, and then Jordan Mason is going to take up like another 30%, and then you're just going to have like random hey, wow, CJ Ham is healthy and back on the team. Let's give him a carry, right? Or whatever, right? Like you'll let Xavier Scott, I don't know. But you'll end up with a couple of others, assuming that everyone's healthy. But it seems like the Vikings really like this drive-by-drive approach as opposed to kind of a situational approach. Like, if you handled this situationally, you would, have Aaron Jones handle it, between the 20s. And then once you got into the red zone, Jordan Mason would take some more roles. Maybe on some third downs, you've had Jordan Mason in there to pass protect or Xavier Scott to catch. But, they tend to seem to like drive-by-drive. And so you have these running backs that, depending on how long these drives are, can radically change in the touch distribution from game to game to game. But I think by the end of the year, it's going to be 60-65%. And then Jordan Mason is going to come in once every 3 drives or so and handle the load there. But, it's ultimately a good thing because Aaron Jones in low touch situations is remarkably efficient. He's a very good running back, but you just can't rely on him to be kind of an every down, every carry guy, like, the running backs that we had become used to for longer than most of the rest of the NFL because they had Adrian Peterson and Dalvin Cook. So I don't know if that's going to be the possibility.
Well, I think they could mix in Mewelde Moore, maybe Rock Thomas, Mike Boone could be tossed.
I love Mike Boone.
Point. Mike Asiata could, or Matt
Jordan
Asiata,
Todman. Yeah, Matt Asiata.
Sure.
There was a Mike Asiata though.
So let's move forward from that. Here's what I think could happen. I think that ideally, you're right that they would want Aaron Jones to get a little bit more because he's more dynamic, that he can be a weapon out of the backfield and not just a swing pass guy, not just a screen guy, but legitimately go down the field. We saw multiple big explosive plays to Aaron Jones downfield during camp, including in the joint practices where, the other team's really trying and like, wow, yeah, he can really do this. At the same time, Jordan Mason is younger and he's violent. And I would like to see them have some tendency breakers when it comes to this. I would like to see them actually occasionally run on second down and not just always have that be a play action.
You know how bad it has to be for two eggheads to be like, you got to run on second down
right.
a bit more, man.
Right. Like it's the analytically right thing to do to not run on second down because you don't want third down. But every once in a while, you have to do it or the other team will know exactly what you're doing and they'll send all of their pressures. I would like to see a mix of those two subbing in and out of the backfield circumstantially as well. As you mentioned, I mean, I don't want to see Aaron Jones pounding into 300-pound dudes flying over the line of scrimmage on 3rd and 1. I want to see Jordan Mason back there. And I also want to see some swing passes to him. I want to see him part of the passing game because that's not something that will be expected. I could see it being closer to a little bit of a 50-50 because I also think Mason's going to have some games where you just can't take him out because he is that big, that violent. And if he's running over another team, it might be a little bit of a McKinnon and Latavius Murray type of thing to stick with random where it was like, all right,
there we go.
It's working. It's working for you today. You're the guy. It's working for you today. You're the guy.
I like that. I like the McKinnon Murray kind of, especially because that one just kind of emerged because Adrian Peterson wasn't available.
Right.
But
Delvin, right? Delvin got hurt. That was how that one.
It was Asiata and McKinnon. Yeah.
Right. And there was no hot hand that year. But the following year was Cook, right?
But yeah, no, I think that makes a fair amount of sense. Again, that is what I'd prefer. I don't see it. Again, I'd love to be proven wrong. I think it does make sense to kind of do the drive-by-drive stuff because there is a lot of like, what's happening, are we feeling kind of the way that these blocks are developing? Can we establish a sense of timing so that these offensive linemen, running backs can be in sync? We've got guys that can catch the ball, even though they're bigger guys like Jordan Mason. We've got guys that can run between the tackles, even though they're smaller like Aaron Jones, right? Like I understand like why you would do it and also what benefits that provides, especially because like, having a running back in there doesn't give you a tell. But I think that's just a problem to be solved. You can manage that. You bring someone in on 3rd and 1 that typically likes to run up the middle or is very good at least at running up the middle, that sets you up really well for a play action, which like who doesn't love play action more on 3rd and 1 than Kevin O'Connell, right? So like, that's, I think you get to access some things by producing tendencies that you can break. And I think that a little bit more circumstantial play, a little bit more scenario specific play would be good for the Vikings, but I kind of understand like why they tend to avoid it.
Okay. The last question, you can't pass on it. It's, I think the most pressing question for the Minnesota Vikings organization that is not what is JJ McCarthy for the future. I mean, that's the number one thing we're all finding out. Is he good enough to take you there? What's he going to be for this franchise? Number 2 for biggest questions is, can Kevin O'Connell win in the playoffs? And it is a really long way from here. It's a long journey to get to the postseason. And yet, when you get hired to do the thing that your predecessor wasn't doing, which is to get you into the playoffs, get playoff wins, and you get 2 bites at the apple and you get outcoached in both of those games, including one huge disappointment at home. And then you win 14 games, you win coach of the year. Everyone says that you're the quarterback whisperer and they talk about you as an elite coach. Kind of has to happen. And it's a weird timeline to be on because it's a first-year quarterback, but it's a veteran team that's ready for this. And I think it's a coach that's ready for this. We've seen a lot of coaches who are new and young, and they have great success in the regular season. It happened to McVay in his first year. They had the number 1 offense, and then they went and who did they lose to? Was it Atlanta maybe that they lost to in that first year? Whoever it was. It
would make sense if it was Atlanta because I remember Atlanta taking the Packers out, right? Like that, which is nuts now that I think about it.
Yeah, I don't remember the playoff bracket for that year, but the point just being that McVay struggled early. LaFleur still hasn't really had much success in the playoffs himself. And not to make any apologies for that, but it's sort of typical. Andy Reid would get criticized early in his career for having great regular season teams and not getting over the hump. I think once you get your second contract as a head coach, any excuse is off the table. It's not, Kirk can't come up with the big play because he was checking down because he can't run and Ezra Cleveland got beat and all that sort of stuff. Like the excuses are off the table. He didn't have a good enough interior line, so they got their faces punched in Glendale, Arizona. That's not the case anymore. They've invested on every single level of this team like crazy. It is time to get it done in the playoffs.
Yeah, and the thing is that like it is like an unfair league, right? Like it is. I'm not going to say it's worse, but it is kind of a little bit of a curse to keep on producing these teams that overperform, right? Like I don't think anyone expected the Vikings to win 14 games last year, or I think even make the playoffs. Like Sam Darnold, are you kidding me? And it's a credit to O'Connell that they even got to the playoffs. But you do it every year, and then you don't make, you don't create a playoff win or anything like that. Like Marvin Lewis is always going to be remembered for not winning playoff games, constantly making the playoffs and not winning playoff games. And no one really thinks of Marvin Lewis as this like really great or outstanding coach, even though he coached some of, the better teams that we've seen, especially given the constraints, the ownership give the Bengals, right? And so I think that that's just kind of the way that you end up getting remembered. I mean, even Zimmer's remembered as a playoff loser. He has playoff wins. He has multiple playoff wins, right? And he's remembered kind of as a playoff loser, right? And so that's just kind of the nature of taking on this job, is that you get evaluated by somewhat unfair circumstances. And so I think that, yeah, that's going to be kind of the primary question. It doesn't even have to be this year, but if he doesn't win this year, it kind of produces, our expectation for next year, where the talking points will all be, can he win in the playoffs? Can he get it done? And, the way people talk about it is sometimes funny, right? Because when Lamar Jackson wasn't winning in the playoffs, the first 2 years in the league, people are like, well, I'm not talking about it now, but next year people are going to be asking if you can win it. It's like, well, by doing that, you are saying it. Like you are just, asking if you can win in the playoff, but you're just removing yourself from criticism. Very, very brave of you. And I think that's what's going to happen here is, I think that you're right. Like at some point, people are going to be like, all of these excuses, man. Like if you're building up these expectations of your ability to beat these other teams and you don't beat those other teams, then you're not as good as people claim that you are. And you take a look at some of these like, big moments in these games, like, okay, yeah, Kirk Cousins checked it down on like 4th and 15 or whatever it was. And there was pressure on the play. And it's like, well, what were you doing for the other 58 minutes of the game?
Right.
That against the Giants, right? that you needed that 4th and 15. I think it's fair to like, maybe it's unfair to point to a specific moment, but it's fair to point to this whole game and just be like, hey, you got caved in by the Lions multiple times.
Right.
There has to be a solution. And if there's not a solution, then we'll find someone else, because against all odds, despite this being kind of some of the worst drafting we've ever seen, these are amazing rosters. And you're not getting it done. So that wouldn't happen this year. It wouldn't happen next year, but it would start creating kind of these concerns. And Andy Reid himself would say it was probably a good thing that he left Philadelphia. Again, it sounded like the resignation / firing was mutual, whatever. He himself said it was like a good thing, and it kind of reset and allowed him to be, the coach that he was, which ended up winning a number of Super Bowls.
It's interesting because you mentioned us as, analytical nerds and that kind of thing, demanding more second down runs. And I feel a little bit the same way, because when you try to pin it down with the playoffs, it's very hard to come up with anything more than, well, usually the best team wins, who has the best record. And if they don't, probably some random stuff happened. And playoffs, everyone, like, enjoy it. So how can you judge a coach based on that when the larger sample is this guy winning all the time? And yet that's life. That's football. Yeah. It matters the most where you finish and when you're playing the best teams in the toughest games. And it's great to win against Chicago and Soldier Field, because some coaches couldn't do that in Vikings history. But where it's really going to matter is where you'll ultimately be judged. Sorry, that's unfair. It's like, it's unfair that a boxing match, they can only fight once and not in a 7-game series, but that's life. They put the belt on the guy who's still standing. And that's kind of the same way it is in the playoffs. Before you go, Arif, give me just one of your off-season takes. Nobody believes in you with this take, but this is your take and you're riding it through 2025.
Okay, I think I wasn't prepared for this, so I didn't.
No, but it's still another question.
Yeah, no.
You knew there was going to be questions.
Yeah, no, I figured it out. I think my hottest take is that Trevor Lawrence will legitimately be a good quarterback who's going to put together a season that people will respect. That's the take, which I think it's fair, but it's also, I think it feels hot for a lot of people.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I think that's a fair take. I mean, he's got some better coaching, definitely a better offensive system than with Doug Peterson, more modern, at least with Liam Cohen. And I think that was in my bold predictions that I wrote in June and never think about again till I pulled them out in December and look how silly I was. But I think I had something similar to like, they've got, a great receiver. They've added another receiver very high in the draft. I assume he's going to play a lot of receiver. So maybe we see this magical version that hasn't been there before. But even historically, quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence have at least 1 year where they kind of break out of being just okay. Right. Yeah. And no one can explain it. And then the next year it's gone. But that's what it is. So, okay. I like it. You have picked the Jaguars to be something.
Oh, God, yeah.
That was
I didn't need you to put it like that, man.
When I said hot, everyone's mind went to what's Arif going to say about the Jags? That's what everybody said.
Yeah, the biggest market team in the NFL. I could not have picked a more explosive team to talk about.
Can't wait till we go back again. Arif Hasan, wideleft.football is the site over on Substack. Go sign up. It is a great football writing. You've added to your team there as well. So you got stuff coming out all the time. And I can't wait to see what you have to say about this 2025 season. So thank you so much for your time, my dog.
Yeah, man. That's on me. I didn't put enough dog puns in there.
No, you didn't. It was rough. Goodbye. I'm done.
Bye.
I'm done.
Peace.
Arif Hasan there on the show, one of my good friends, and does great stuff. Wide left out football, great football writing there if you want to check it out. I, during that conversation, did have a chance to take the dog outside, so we're all good from that perspective as well. And if you guys don't forget, make sure you answer the FanDuel question of the day, which is, what is your favorite game? It is week 1, folks. It has arrived. The lead up, the build up to actual football is here. I want to know your favorite matchup. For me, it's Buffalo and Baltimore. The Bills are 1.5 point favorite on FanDuel, and that's the one. Sunday Night Football. I'm flying out Monday to Chicago, so that means all of Sunday, plaster myself to the couch, get to watch every single game, and then Sunday Night Football. Actually was going to probably go live after the day of games and then watch Sunday Night Football while chatting with you about the day of games on Sunday. And then, of course, we've got Thursday. Did I see there's a Friday game? What? The NFL taking over every single day of our lives. And college football was kind of doing the same thing. There was Thursday, Friday, and then Bill Belichick's Tar Heels are playing tonight. So your favorite matchup of week 1, the one that's got your interest, or maybe even just most intriguing, I'm interested to hear as our FanDuel question of the day. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what Arif had to say. Texans and Rams is a good nomination, I think. Texans defense, Rams offense. And I was looking today, somebody asked for my predictions, right? Like, I have any chance of ever getting anything right when it comes to the Super Bowl, NFC Championship, whatever. And when I got to the NFC, I was like, Philly, no. The Rams, no. Washington, I mean, so wide open in the NFC, so wide open in the NFC North. The AFC feels like it's a little more decided, but once we think that we've got everything resolved in the NFL, it proves to us that we very much do not. But I like that game. I like Houston versus the Los Angeles Rams, 2 phenomenal defenses that won playoff games last year by beating the heck out of the other team's offensive line. And I think we're probably some of the inspiration for the Minnesota Vikings to handle their offseason the way that they did. But I did want to, circle back to Arif and I's conversation about Kevin O'Connell in 2 different areas. One was where he pushes down on the aggressiveness and where he backs off of the gas pedal with JJ McCarthy. I don't know what the answer is going to be. Arif was pretty confident that it's going to be aggressiveness. I think that at the beginning of the season, we might see a little bit more of Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, and a little bit more of the play action bootleg game and a little more of the underneath stuff to stay on the field and keep long drives going, because as much as Kevin O'Connell hunts explosives, as Arif was talking about, with everything, there's a give and take. if you are a team in the NBA that does nothing but shoot threes, and that's your big thing, we shoot threes all the time. Well, you end up like that Houston Rockets team that missed 27 threes and ended up losing in the Western Conference Final because of that, right? Sometimes that happens where you could go super hot or cold. And I felt like that was the Vikings offense a lot of times last year where it was hot or cold. If they got turnovers in the games, which we have to remember, they got a ton of turnovers, ton of sacks last year. But, they would take advantage of it and they would hit big plays, a 97-yard touchdown, explosive plays left and right, long passing, all that stuff. But then you would get into other times. And I'll give you an example. The Thursday night game that they lost to the Rams, I felt like they just didn't stay on the field and then they got worn out as the game went along. Their offense and defense, or their defense got worn out as the game and then went on, and the offense wasn't consistent enough to wear out the Rams defense. Of course, the Rams got to face mask in the game and not give the Vikings a final chance to, go win that game. But as it played out, there were too many 3-and-outs. And through the whole season, I felt that way. And even when you look at their scoring percentage, so how many drives you got versus how often you scored, it wasn't as high as their actual scoring was, which to me would say that they were getting a lot of, big plays. And they were having to also sometimes, punt, and they turned the ball over a bit and they were getting sacked too much. I think there's some of that with JJ McCarthy that you can take away the extremes. Hey, it's not working. You're going 3-and-out, 3-and-out, 3-and-out. But also maybe even if you end up punting, you're having an 8-play drive where you've got the ball for 3 or 4 minutes and then, all right, well, it didn't work out or you kicked a field goal. That was the extreme of that is the 2015 Vikings where it felt like they just wanted to settle for a field goal every single time and they didn't want to have any sort of, turnover or anything else. They played so safe and they ran so much. That's never going to be Kevin O'Connell. And that was the 2019 Vikings in a lot of ways too, where it was play action shots down the field, but otherwise run Dalvin Cook all the time. Don't turn the ball over. And you can win a lot of football games just by doing that. Like that's Alex Smith, Kansas City. That's Pittsburgh over the last few years. I think that if you take all right, not like all of the all in, but some of it, and you take some of the downfield passing, the play action downfield passing, and then take some of it from what KOC's never been, which is more of a ground and pound type of coach. And just a little bit from, you bring it in from one area, bring it up from another area, get the sliders closer together. If you used to play the old Maddens, I don't know if they have this anymore, where you'd set your sliders for your your run pass ratio for your offense. And with, O'Connell, it's not so much about the ratio from last year, but really the explosives versus possession. Explosives way up, possession down, and it kind of works like that, right? So I think that they do need to stay on the field for longer drives, and they do need to work both Mason and Aaron Jones, and they need to work Hockenson underneath and hit the occasional shot down the field. But it plays more to McCarthy's strengths, I think, to have a good intermediate passing game. Clearly, downfield passing is successful. If you can hit shots down the field, if you get a 20-yard play, your chances of scoring go way up. That's obvious, right? Everybody with a brain would know that if you get explosive plays, you have a better chance. But also, I think if you get to the fourth quarter and the other teams had the ball for 10 more minutes than you, it's pretty tough. It is pretty tough for your defense. And as the season went along, I thought the Vikings defense did get worn down last year, and they were not the same version. Even though they didn't have major injuries, they were not the same version in the middle, late part of the season as they were early in the year. So I think that, with McCarthy, he can throw the ball down the field. He can hit deeper shots, but I don't think that some of those throws that are 25 yards where you have to put it up over a linebacker and right in front of a safety, I don't think that's really the best throw for him. So if they do play more of a possession game, that's going to, I think, play to his strengths. That's how he came up in the game with Michigan. And I'm not saying he'll be Michigan-style JJ McCarthy that only throws a handful of passes. It's just that a slightly safer approach is not a bad idea to then start to find out. Like, what do you really have with JJ McCarthy? How comfortable is he really with throws X, Y, and Z? But I don't know. Like, that's how it works in my head. But I don't know how Kevin O'Connell wants it to work. O'Connell might be like, I drafted this guy in the first round, and we are throwing the dang football, and here we go, and we'll run when we're ahead. And maybe that's how he's going to approach it. That will be very, very interesting to find that out. So that is what I got for you tonight. Again, if you're rewatching this FanDuel question of the day, make sure you jump in the comments. Your favorite game from week 1 that's not the Vikings and the Bears, the one that has your interest. Tomorrow night, Jeremiah Searles and Tuesday Morning Left Guard will return for its 5th season of former Viking Jeremiah Searles on the show, and what is shaping up to maybe be our most fascinating season. I hope that it is. So we will talk to you all tomorrow night. Thanks for joining. Thanks for the great questions and comments, and we will see y'all then. Our first day out at TCO Performance Center, by the way, Wednesday, is when we will hear from Kevin O'Connell, JJ McCarthy, and we'll have a breakdown of that on the show. And then guests and Courtney Cronin will be here, and it's going to be great, man. It's going to be great. Lots of good football talk tonight, and we will see you tomorrow.